Sarah Martinez sat in the campus library, her laptop screen glowing with the final edits of her senior thesis. Around her, other students chatted excitedly about graduation plans, family visits, and celebration parties. She tried to focus on her work, but their conversations kept pulling her attention away from the words on her screen. "My mom's flying in from Seattle and my dad's taking the whole week off work," one girl gushed to her friend at the next table. "They're so proud. Mom's already crying, and graduation isn't for another 3 weeks." Sarah's fingers paused over the keyboard. She glanced around the library, watching groups of students planning their big day together. Some were showing off graduation announcements, others were discussing restaurant reservations and photo locations. The excitement in the air was almost tangible, but it felt distant to her, like watching a movie through a window. She had worked 4 years for this moment. 4 years of juggling classes, work-study jobs, and sleepless nights. 4 years of believing that education would be her ticket to a better life. Her grades were excellent. Her thesis was groundbreaking research in environmental science, and she had already secured a position with a respected consulting firm in Denver. By every measure, she should have been thrilled. But as she sat there, surrounded by the chatter of celebration plans, Sarah felt a familiar ache in her chest. Her parents had passed away in a car accident during her sophomore year. The tragedy had nearly derailed her education entirely. She remembered sitting in the financial aid office wondering how she would possibly continue school without their support. The insurance money had helped with tuition, but it couldn't fill the emotional void they left behind. Her Aunt Linda from Phoenix had offered to come to graduation, but Sarah could hear the strain in her voice during their phone calls. Linda was caring for her own elderly mother and dealing with her husband's recent job loss. Sarah couldn't bear to add another burden to her aunt's already full plate, so she had insisted that she would be fine on her own. "I'm used to handling things myself now," she had told Linda during their last conversation. "Besides, graduation is just a ceremony. The real achievement is getting the degree." But sitting in the library now, watching her classmates plan elaborate celebrations, Sarah realized she had been lying to herself. The ceremony mattered. Having someone there to share the moment mattered. She had spent 2 years convincing herself that independence meant not needing anyone, but deep down, she longed to see a familiar face in the crowd of graduates' families. Sarah closed her laptop and packed up her things. As she walked across campus toward her small apartment, she passed the graduation venue. Workers were already setting up chairs in neat rows, and she could see the stage where she would walk in 3 weeks to receive her diploma. The sight should have filled her with anticipation, but instead, it made her stomach twist with loneliness. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate Emma, who had graduated the previous semester. "Can't wait to see you walk across that stage. Wish I could be there, but the new job won't let me take time off so soon. You're going to be amazing." Sarah smiled, despite her mood. Emma had been her anchor through the worst of times, helping her navigate grief while maintaining her studies. They had grown incredibly close, but Emma's career had taken her to New York, and the distance felt enormous now. That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment grading papers for the undergraduate course. She taught as a teaching assistant. It was her last week in the position, and she would miss the interaction with her students. Teaching had given her a sense of purpose during her darkest moments, reminding her why she had chosen environmental science in the first place. As she reviewed the final projects, one paper caught her attention. It was written by Marcus Thompson, a non-traditional student who had returned to college after years in the military. His project on urban sustainability was exceptional, showing a deep understanding of the complexities involved in balancing economic development with environmental protection. Marcus had been quiet in class but always engaged. She had noticed that he often stayed after lectures to ask thoughtful questions, and she appreciated his unique perspective as someone who had seen different parts of the world. He was older than most students, probably in his early 30s, and she had occasionally wondered about his story. Why had he decided to pursue environmental science? What experiences had shaped his interest in sustainability? She made notes on his paper, praising his innovative approach to combining military logistics principles with environmental planning. It was the kind of thinking that could make a real difference in the field, and she wanted to encourage him to continue his Research. The next day, Sarah held her final office hours. A few students stopped by with last-minute questions about their grades, but the afternoon was mostly quiet. She was packing up her desk when she heard a soft knock on the door. Professor Martinez? Marcus Thompson stood in the doorway holding a small potted plant. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Sarah said, gesturing for him to come in. And please call me Sarah. I'm not technically a professor yet. Marcus smiled and stepped into the office. I wanted to thank you for everything this semester. Your class really opened my eyes to how much environmental work connects to everything else. The military taught me about logistics and planning, but you helped me see how those skills could be used to help the planet. He handed her the small plant. It's a succulent, low maintenance, but it'll last for years if you take care of it. Kind of like the lessons you taught us. Sarah felt unexpectedly touched by the gesture. Thank you, Marcus, that's very thoughtful. I really enjoyed having you in class. Your final project was outstanding. I was wondering, Marcus said, shifting slightly on his feet. Are you planning to continue teaching? You have a gift for making complex topics accessible. Sarah shook her head. I'm starting a consulting job in Denver right after graduation. It's a great opportunity to apply what I've learned in the real world. That's fantastic, Marcus said genuinely. You'll do amazing work there. The world needs more people who can bridge the gap between science and practical solutions. As Marcus turned to leave, Sarah felt a sudden impulse to extend their conversation. There was something calming about his presence, a steady confidence that reminded her of her father in some ways. Marcus, she called out, would you like to grab coffee sometime before the semester ends? I'd love to hear more about how you're planning to use your degree. Marcus paused at the door and smiled. I'd like that very much. 3 days later, Sarah met Marcus at the small coffee shop near campus that she had frequented throughout her college years. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting warm patterns on the worn wooden tables. She arrived a few minutes early and chose a quiet corner table, suddenly feeling nervous about the meeting. She couldn't quite explain why she had invited him for coffee, but something about their brief interaction in her office had stayed with her. Marcus arrived right on time, carrying a weathered leather messenger bag and wearing a simple blue button-down shirt. He moved with the purposeful stride she had noticed in class, but his expression was relaxed and friendly. Thank you for suggesting this, he said as he sat down across from her. I have to admit, I don't get many chances to talk about environmental science with someone who shares the passion. They ordered their drinks and settled into easy conversation. Sarah learned that Marcus had served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a logistics coordinator before deciding to pursue his bachelor's degree. He had seen firsthand how environmental factors affected military operations and civilian populations, sparking his interest in sustainability. The thing that struck me most, Marcus explained, stirring his coffee thoughtfully, was how water scarcity affected everything. Military strategy, local politics, people's daily lives. It made me realize that environmental issues aren't just academic concepts. They're the foundation that everything else is built on. Sarah found herself leaning forward, genuinely engaged. That's exactly the kind of real-world perspective the field needs. Too often, environmental science gets stuck in theory, but you understand the practical implications. Speaking of practical implications, Marcus said with a slight grin, I have to ask about something I've been curious about. You always seem to know exactly what questions students were going to ask before they asked them. How do you read people so well? Sarah laughed, feeling more relaxed than she had in weeks. Years of practice, I suppose. When you've been the one asking questions from the back of the room, you learn to recognize that look of confusion or curiosity. You were a back-of-the-room student? Definitely. I was terrified of speaking up in my early classes. It took me until junior year to feel confident enough to participate actively in discussions. Marcus looked surprised. I never would have guessed that. You have such a natural teaching presence. Their conversation flowed effortlessly from environmental science to their different paths through college. Sarah shared stories about her research, and Marcus told her about the challenges of returning to academic life after military service. She was struck by how he listened, giving her his full attention, in a way that reminded her of her parents. "Can I ask you something personal?" Marcus said after they had talked for over an hour. "You mentioned starting a job in Denver right after graduation. Do you have family there?" Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest. "No family anywhere. Actually, my parents passed away during my sophomore year, and my only other relatives are dealing with their own challenges right now." Marcus's expression softened immediately. "I'm so sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult to handle while managing school." "It was," Sarah admitted, surprised by how easy it felt to share this with him. "There were moments when I wasn't sure I'd make it through, but somehow I did. That takes tremendous strength," Marcus said quietly. "I've seen people handle much less with much more support." Something in his tone made Sarah look at him more carefully. "It sounds like you know something about handling difficult situations alone." Marcus nodded slowly. "My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer. We had been trying to start a family, but she got sick right after I left the military. The whole experience of watching her fight and then losing her made me realize I wanted to do something meaningful with my life. That's why I went back to school." Sarah felt her breath catch. She hadn't expected such a personal revelation, but she was grateful that he had trusted her with it. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I can't imagine how painful that must have been." "It was the hardest thing I've ever gone through," he said. "But it taught me something important about finding purpose in pain. Your environmental work, my decision to go back to school, we're both trying to create something positive from our losses." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the weight of what they had shared. Sarah realized that this was the first time in 2 years that she had talked about her parents' death with someone who truly understood the magnitude of that kind of loss. "Are you planning to walk at graduation?" Marcus asked eventually. Sarah hesitated. "I'm registered, but I'm not sure anyone will be there to see it. It might feel a bit pointless." "May I respectfully disagree?" Marcus said with gentle firmness. "Walking at graduation isn't just about having an audience. It's about honoring the work you've done and the obstacles you've overcome. You've earned that moment, regardless of who's watching." His words resonated more deeply than Sarah expected. "Did you walk when you graduated from high school?" "Actually, no. I was so eager to start my adult life that I finished early through an accelerated program. I always regretted not having that formal closure. That's part of why this graduation means so much to me." "Will you have family there?" Sarah asked. Marcus shook his head. "My parents live in Oregon now, and they can't travel easily anymore. My dad has mobility issues, and my mom doesn't like leaving him. I have a few Army buddies scattered around the country, but everyone's got their own lives now." Sarah felt a sudden kinship with him that surprised her. Here was someone who understood exactly what it felt like to face a major milestone alone. But unlike her, he seemed to have found peace with the situation. "How do you do it?" she asked, impulsively. "How do you stay positive about things when you don't have the traditional support system?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I think it's about redefining what support looks like. I may not have family in the traditional sense, but I have people who matter to me. Fellow veterans who check in, professors who've taken interest in my work, classmates who've become friends. Even conversations like this one remind me that meaningful connections can happen in unexpected ways." Sarah looked around the coffee shop, noticing how the late afternoon light had shifted, creating new patterns on their table. She realized they had been talking for nearly 2 hours, and it felt like minutes. "I should probably let you get going," she said reluctantly. "Only if you have somewhere else to be," Marcus replied. "I'm enjoying this conversation more than I've enjoyed anything in quite a while." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. When was the last time someone had said something like that to her? When was the last time she had felt so comfortable talking to someone new? "Actually," she said, making a decision that surprised her, "would you like to take a walk? The campus is beautiful this time of day, and I realized I've spent so much time in the library that I've barely appreciated it lately." Marcus smiled and stood up, gathering his messenger bag. "I'd love to. Lead the way." As they walked out of the coffee shop together, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. The loneliness that had been her constant companion seemed to have lifted, replaced by the simple pleasure of good company and genuine conversation. Over the next week, Sarah found herself thinking about her conversation with Marcus more than she had expected. Their walk around campus had stretched into dinner at a small restaurant near the university, where they continued sharing stories about their academic journeys, their losses, and their hopes for the future. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt so understood by someone she had just met. Marcus had mentioned that he was working on an independent research project about sustainable urban planning, and Sarah found herself genuinely curious about his progress. When she ran into him in the campus library 2 days later, it felt natural to ask how his work was going. "Would you like to see what I'm working on?" he asked, gesturing to his laptop screen. "I could use a fresh perspective from someone with your expertise." Sarah pulled up a chair next to his, immediately drawn into his project. He was analyzing case studies of cities that had successfully implemented green infrastructure, looking for patterns that could be applied to post-conflict reconstruction efforts. It was exactly the kind of practical application of environmental science that excited her most. "This is fascinating," she said, scrolling through his research. "Have you looked at the Medellin transformation model? They did something similar with urban planning as a tool for social change." Marcus's eyes lit up. "I've read about it briefly, but I haven't done a deep dive. Do you think it would be applicable to what I'm studying?" For the next 2 hours, they worked side by side, Sarah helping Marcus incorporate new research angles into his project, while he challenged her to think about environmental solutions from a logistics perspective. Their collaboration felt effortless, each bringing strengths that complemented the other's work. "You know," Marcus said as they were packing up their materials, "you have an incredible ability to synthesize complex information quickly. Have you ever considered going into research full-time instead of consulting?" Sarah paused, considering the question. "I've thought about it, but research positions are so competitive, and I need the financial stability of the consulting job. Graduate school debt doesn't pay itself." "That's fair," Marcus said. "But don't close the door on research entirely. The field needs people who can think the way you do." As they walked out of the library together, Marcus hesitated slightly before asking, "Would you be interested in grabbing lunch tomorrow? I promise I won't monopolize the entire conversation with research questions." Sarah smiled. "I'd like that, and feel free to monopolize with research questions if you want. I enjoy them." The next day's lunch led to another evening walk around campus, and soon Sarah found that her week had developed a comfortable rhythm that included regular conversations with Marcus. They met for coffee between classes, studied in the library together, and shared meals when their schedules aligned. She began looking forward to these interactions in a way that surprised her. What struck her most was how easy it felt to be around Marcus. There was no pressure to be impressive or to maintain any kind of facade. He seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions, asking questions that made her think more deeply about her own goals and interests. After 2 years of focusing solely on academic achievement and career preparation, it felt refreshing to have conversations that ranged from professional aspirations to personal philosophies. One afternoon, as they were reviewing his research project, Marcus looked up from his laptop and said, "Can I ask you something that might be too personal?" Sarah felt her stomach flutter slightly, but she nodded. "Of course. You've helped me so much with this project, and you clearly love research. But every time I suggest you consider pursuing it further, you change the subject. Is it really just about financial security?" Sarah set down her coffee cup and considered how to answer. She trusted Marcus, but the real reason was something she had never articulated out loud to anyone. "It's partly about money," she said slowly. "But it's also about fear. Research means staying in academia, and academia means being around other people's families and support systems all the time. Conferences where people bring their spouses, department parties where everyone talks about their kids, graduation ceremonies where families celebrate together. I'm not sure I'm ready to constantly be reminded of what I don't have." Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. "That makes perfect sense," he said. "I've felt something similar about certain social situations. It's not that you want to avoid happiness or connection, but sometimes seeing what you've lost reflected everywhere can be exhausting." "Exactly," Sarah said, feeling relieved that he understood. "The consulting job feels safer somehow. I can focus on the work without the personal reminders." "But," Marcus said gently, "what if you're underestimating your ability to handle those situations? What if avoiding them is costing you opportunities that could actually bring you joy?" Sarah looked at him carefully. "Are you speaking from experience?" Marcus smiled ruefully. "I am. After my wife died, I avoided anything that reminded me of couples activities or family gatherings. I turned down wedding invitations, skipped family reunions, even avoided certain restaurants where we used to go together. I thought I was protecting myself, but I was actually isolating myself from experiences that could have been healing." "What changed your mind?" "A conversation with my army chaplain, actually. He pointed out that grief is something you carry with you, not something you can avoid by changing your environment. He suggested that instead of running from reminders, I could learn to carry my love for my wife with me into new experiences." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes unexpectedly. "That's beautiful and terrifying." "It is both," Marcus agreed. "But I've found that when I approach new situations with the intention of honoring what I've lost while still being open to what I might gain, the experience is much richer than when I'm simply trying to avoid pain." They sat in comfortable silence, for a moment both lost in their own thoughts. Sarah realized that Marcus had given her a new way to think about her future that she had never considered. "Speaking of new experiences," Marcus said after a while, "I have a confession to make. I've been thinking about graduation, and I keep imagining how proud my wife would have been to see me walk across that stage. It made me realize that even though she won't be there physically, I want to celebrate the moment anyway." "That sounds like a healthy way to approach it," Sarah said. "The thing is," Marcus continued, "I've been thinking about what you said about not having anyone there to see you graduate, and I was wondering if you might consider the possibility that maybe we could be there for each other." Sarah felt her breath catch. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we both understand what it's like to face big moments alone. Maybe we don't have to do that this time. Maybe we could sit together at graduation, celebrate our achievements together, and give each other the support that families usually provide." Sarah stared at him, processing the unexpected proposal. The idea both thrilled and terrified her. It would mean opening herself up to connection in a way she had been avoiding for 2 years, but it would also mean having someone in the audience who genuinely cared about her success. "You would want to do that?" she asked quietly. "I would be honored to do that," Marcus replied with sincerity that made her chest tighten with emotion. Sarah looked around the library, noticing the other students bent over their books, preparing for finals and looking forward to graduation. For the first time in weeks, the approaching ceremony didn't fill her with dread. "I think I'd like that very much," she said, surprising herself with how certain she sounded. The final 2 weeks before graduation transformed from a period of anxious anticipation into something Sarah had never expected to experience: genuine excitement. She and Marcus began planning their graduation day together, discussing everything, from where to meet beforehand to where they might go for dinner afterward. For the first time since her parents' death, Sarah found herself looking forward to a major milestone instead of simply enduring it. Their friendship had evolved into something deeper and more meaningful than either had anticipated. They spent their free time together naturally, whether studying in the library, taking walks around campus, or simply sitting in one of their apartments, talking about their plans for the future. Sarah discovered that Marcus was an excellent cook, a skill he had developed during his military service, and she enjoyed the simple pleasure of sharing home-cooked meals with someone who appreciated both good food and good conversation. "I never realized how much I missed cooking for someone else," Marcus told her one evening as they prepared dinner together in his small kitchen. "It's one of those things that seems pointless when you're alone, but becomes enjoyable again when you have company." Sarah understood exactly what he meant. She had been surviving on frozen meals and takeout for 2 years. telling herself that cooking elaborate meals for one person was impractical. But helping Marcus prepare fresh vegetables and experimenting with new recipes felt like rediscovering a part of herself she had forgotten existed. I used to cook with my mother. She found herself sharing as they chopped vegetables side by side. Some of my best memories with her are from our Sunday afternoon cooking sessions. We would try recipes from different countries and pretend we were traveling the world through food. "What was your favorite cuisine to explore together?" Marcus asked, his tone gentle and encouraging. "Italian, definitely. We spent an entire summer working our way through this massive Italian cookbook my dad bought her for her birthday. By the end, we could make fresh pasta from scratch and had perfected this incredible lasagna recipe that took all day to prepare." "Do you still have the cookbook?" Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest. "It's in storage with most of their things. I couldn't bring myself to go through everything when I moved into the dorm." Marcus continued chopping vegetables, giving her space to process the emotion. "Would you consider retrieving it sometime? I'd love to learn how to make that lasagna." The suggestion surprised her. The idea of opening those storage boxes had seemed overwhelming for 2 years, but somehow the thought of doing it with Marcus, for a specific purpose that would honor her mother's memory, felt manageable. "Maybe I would," she said quietly. "I think my mom would have liked you. She always said that the best way to judge someone's character was to see how they treated food and the people they shared it with." She sounds like a wise woman. She was. Both my parents were. They would have been so proud to see me graduate. Marcus looked up from the cutting board and met her eyes. "They would have been incredibly proud, and I think they would be happy to know that you're not facing this milestone alone." Sarah felt tears threaten, but they were different from the tears of grief she had grown accustomed to. These felt healing somehow, as if acknowledging her parents' absence while simultaneously recognizing the presence of someone who cared about her could coexist without contradiction. As graduation day approached, Sarah began receiving messages from classmates she hadn't heard from in months. Emma called from New York to wish her luck, and several of her former study group partners reached out to make plans for the reception afterward. She realized that she had more connections at the university than she had allowed herself to acknowledge during her period of grief-induced isolation. "I think I may have been more isolated than I needed to be," she confided to Marcus during one of their evening walks. "People did try to reach out after my parents died, but I was so focused on just surviving academically that I didn't have energy for social connections." "That's completely understandable," Marcus replied. "Grief has a way of narrowing your focus to just the essentials. The fact that you're ready to reconnect now shows how much you've healed." "I'm not sure I would have been ready without having you to practice with first," Sarah admitted. "You made it feel safe to be vulnerable again." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. "Sarah, you should know that this friendship has been just as important for me. I've spent 3 years convinced that the best parts of my life were behind me. Getting to know you has reminded me that it's possible to build something meaningful from wherever you are right now." Sarah felt her heart race at the intensity in his voice. Over the past 2 weeks, she had begun to recognize that her feelings for Marcus had evolved beyond friendship, but she had been hesitant to acknowledge it even to herself. The prospect of graduation and her impending move to Denver made the timing feel complicated. "Marcus," she started, then stopped, uncertain how to voice what she was feeling. "I know," he said softly. "I feel it too, and I know the timing is difficult, with your job in Denver." They resumed walking, both processing the acknowledgement of something that had been building between them, but remained unspoken until now. "What do you think we should do about it?" Sarah asked eventually. "I think we should focus on graduation first," Marcus said thoughtfully. "This week is about celebrating what you've accomplished. After that, we can figure out how to navigate the geography and the complications." Sarah nodded, appreciating his practical approach even as her heart wanted to solve everything immediately. "Will you stay in touch after I move?" "If you want me to, absolutely. Denver isn't that far from here, and I don't start my new job until August. Maybe we can figure out how to make this work, even if it looks different than either of us expected." The night before graduation, Sarah called her Aunt Linda in Phoenix. She had been putting off the conversation, uncertain how to explain that she wouldn't be facing the ceremony alone after all. "Sarah, honey, how are you feeling about tomorrow?" Linda asked, her voice warm with concern. "Actually, Aunt Linda, I wanted to tell you something. I've made a friend here who's also graduating tomorrow. We're going to sit together and celebrate afterward. I wanted you to know that I won't be alone." Sarah heard her aunt's sharp intake of breath. "Oh, sweetheart, that makes me so happy to hear. I've been worried about you facing such a big day by yourself. Tell me about this friend." Sarah found herself describing Marcus with enthusiasm she hadn't expected, telling Linda about his military service, his environmental research, and how supportive he had been during their friendship. "He sounds wonderful," Linda said when Sarah finished. "I'm so grateful that you found each other. Your parents would be thrilled to know that you have someone special in your life." After hanging up with Linda, Sarah sat in her apartment looking at her graduation cap and gown hanging on her closet door. Tomorrow she would walk across that stage and receive the diploma she had worked so hard for. But more importantly, she would do it knowing that someone who truly understood her journey would be watching from the audience, cheering for her success and sharing in her joy. For the first time in 2 years, graduation day felt like a celebration rather than an ordeal to survive. Graduation morning arrived with perfect spring weather, the kind of day that felt designed for new beginnings. Sarah woke early, not from anxiety as she had expected, but from genuine excitement. She took her time getting ready, carefully arranging her cap and gown and taking a few photos to send to Emma and Aunt Linda. Marcus had texted her the night before with their meeting plan. They would gather at the campus coffee shop an hour before the ceremony, then walk to the graduation venue together. He had mentioned bringing his camera to document the day, something Sarah hadn't even thought to arrange for herself. As she walked across campus toward their meeting spot, Sarah noticed how different everything felt from just a month ago. The same paths, the same buildings, the same spring flowers blooming along the walkways, but her experience of it all had transformed completely. Instead of feeling like she was walking through her college experience alone, she felt connected to the place and the moment in a way that surprised her. Marcus was waiting at a corner table when she arrived, dressed in his graduation regalia and holding 2 coffee cups. His face lit up when he saw her, and he stood to greet her with a warm hug. "You look fantastic," he said, stepping back to admire her in her graduation gown. "Ready for this?" "More ready than I ever thought I'd be," Sarah replied honestly. "How are you feeling?" "Proud," Marcus said without hesitation. "Proud of what we've both accomplished and grateful that we get to share this moment together." They sat and sipped their coffee, watching other graduates and families pass by on their way to the ceremony. Sarah observed the excited chatter and photo-taking around them with none of the loneliness she had anticipated. Having Marcus there changed everything about how she experienced the communal celebration. "I have something for you," Marcus said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small wrapped package and handed it to her. "Marcus, you didn't need to get me anything. I wanted to. Open it." Sarah carefully unwrapped the package to find a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant shaped like a tree. The craftsmanship was beautiful, with tiny leaves etched into the metal surface. "It's an olive tree," Marcus explained. In many cultures, olive trees symbolize wisdom, peace, and new growth. I thought it was fitting for someone starting a new chapter in environmental science. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she fastened the necklace around her neck. "It's perfect. Thank you." "There's something engraved on the back of the pendant," Marcus added quietly. Sarah turned the small tree over and read the inscription. "Rooted in strength, reaching for tomorrow." "Marcus," she whispered, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "I wanted you to have something to remind you of how far you've come and how much you're capable of achieving," he said. "And maybe sometimes it will remind you of today, and that you didn't have to face it alone." They finished their coffee and made their way to the graduation venue, joining the stream of graduates and families converging on the large outdoor amphitheater. Sarah had attended orientation here 4 years ago, nervous and uncertain about what lay ahead. Now she was returning as someone who had not only survived college but thrived, despite extraordinary challenges. The ceremony itself was everything Sarah had hoped it would be. She and Marcus sat together in the section designated for environmental science graduates, surrounded by classmates she had worked with throughout her program. When her name was called, she walked across the stage with confidence, hearing Marcus's enthusiastic cheering from the audience along with the applause from other families. But it was the moment after she received her diploma that surprised her most. As she walked back to her seat, diploma in hand, she caught sight of Marcus watching her with an expression of such genuine pride and joy that she felt her chest swell with emotion. This was what she had been missing for 2 years, someone who truly understood the magnitude of her achievement and celebrated it without reservation. When Marcus's name was called, Sarah cheered louder than she had ever cheered for anything in her life. Watching him walk across that stage, knowing what he had overcome to reach that moment, filled her with admiration and happiness that felt almost overwhelming. After the ceremony, they found each other in the crowd of celebrating graduates and families. Without speaking, they embraced, both processing the emotion of having reached this milestone together. "We did it," Marcus said, holding her close. "We really did," Sarah replied, surprised by how much the "we" meant to her. They spent the next hour taking photos around campus, documenting not just their individual achievements but their shared experience of the day. Several of Sarah's classmates approached to congratulate her and meet Marcus, and she realized how natural it felt to introduce him as her friend, though the words seemed inadequate for what he had become to her. As the afternoon progressed, they made their way to the restaurant Marcus had chosen for their celebration dinner. It was a small Italian place downtown, the kind of family-owned establishment that reminded Sarah of the restaurants she used to visit with her parents. "I thought Italian would be appropriate," Marcus said as they were seated at a quiet table by the window, "given our conversation about cooking with your mother. I wanted tonight to honor both your achievement and her memory." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at his thoughtfulness. The restaurant had the comfortable atmosphere of a place that had been serving families for generations, with checkered tablecloths, soft lighting, and the rich aroma of garlic and herbs filling the air. "This is perfect," she said, looking around at the cozy dining room. "Mom would have loved this place." They ordered wine to celebrate and took their time with the menu, discussing each dish as if they were planning a special occasion meal together. The conversation flowed easily between reminiscing about the day's ceremony and sharing memories from their college experiences. "I keep thinking about something you said a few weeks ago," Sarah said as they waited for their entrees to arrive, "about carrying love with you into new experiences instead of avoiding reminders of what you've lost." "What about it?" Marcus asked, leaning forward with interest. "Today felt like the first time I was able to do that successfully. When I walked across that stage, I wasn't just thinking about my own achievement. I was thinking about how proud my parents would have been. And instead of making me sad, it made the moment feel even more meaningful." Marcus smiled. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd experience. They were there with you today, and every lesson they taught you and every value they instilled in you that got you to that stage." Their dinner arrived, and they continued talking. As they shared plates and sampled each other's choices, Sarah realized that this felt like the kind of celebration dinner she had imagined having with family, full of laughter and genuine connection. "I have a confession to make," Marcus said as they were finishing their main course. "I've been thinking a lot about your move to Denver, and I have a proposal." Sarah felt her heart rate quicken. "What kind of proposal?" "I got some news yesterday that I haven't shared with you yet. The environmental consulting firm I've been interviewing with offered me a position, and they have offices in 3 cities. One of them is Denver." Sarah stared at him, processing what he was saying. "You're thinking about taking a job in Denver?" "I'm thinking about a lot of things," Marcus said carefully. "The position would be perfect for my background, combining logistics and environmental planning. But more importantly, it would mean we could continue building whatever this is between us without the complications of long distance." Sarah felt a rush of emotions, excitement, hope, and a touch of fear at how much she wanted this to work out. "What would that mean for us?" "It would mean taking things one step at a time and seeing where they lead," Marcus replied. "No pressure, no expectations beyond continuing to get to know each other and supporting each other's careers." but it would give us the chance to explore this connection without geography getting in the way. Sarah looked across the table at this man who had appeared in her life at exactly the moment she needed him most. A month ago, she had been dreading graduation and facing her future alone. Now she was sitting across from someone who had not only helped her celebrate her achievements but was willing to restructure his own plans to continue being part of her life. "Marcus," she said quietly, "are you sure this is what you want? I don't want you making major life decisions based on a relationship that's still so new." "I've thought about that," he said. "And here's what I realized. Denver would be a great career move regardless of our relationship. The job opportunity is genuinely exciting, and I've been looking for a fresh start in a new city anyway. The fact that it would also allow us to continue exploring this connection is a bonus, not the primary motivation." Sarah felt a smile spread across her face. "In that case, I think it sounds like a wonderful plan." "Really? Really? I've been dreading the idea of starting over completely alone in a new city. Having a friend there, someone who understands my history and supports my goals, sounds like exactly what I need." "Just a friend?" Marcus asked with a teasing smile. Sarah laughed. "We'll see where it goes, but yes, having you there sounds perfect." As they shared dessert and finished their wine, Sarah reflected on how completely her life had changed in just a few weeks. She had gone from facing her future with resignation to anticipating it with genuine excitement. The job in Denver no longer felt like an escape from painful reminders. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter that she would write with intention and hope. "Thank you," she said as they prepared to leave the restaurant. "For dinner?" Marcus asked. "For everything. For helping me remember that I don't have to do everything alone. For making graduation day something to celebrate instead of just survive. For being willing to take a chance on whatever this is between us." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "Thank you for letting me be part of your celebration. Today was one of the best days I've had in years." As they walked out of the restaurant together, Sarah touched the olive tree pendant at her throat and thought about the inscription. "Rooted in strength, reaching for tomorrow." For the first time in years, tomorrow felt full of possibility instead of uncertainty. 6 months later, Sarah stood in her new apartment in Denver unpacking the last of her boxes. The space was bright and airy, with large windows that overlooked the mountains she had fallen in love with during her first week in the city. She had chosen a neighborhood that was convenient to both her consulting firm and Marcus's office, and they had quickly discovered coffee shops, hiking trails, and farmers markets that had become part of their regular routine. The transition to Denver had been smoother than either of them had anticipated. Sarah's consulting work was challenging and rewarding, involving projects that allowed her to apply her environmental science background to real-world problems. Marcus had settled into his position with enthusiasm, finding that his unique combination of military logistics experience and environmental training made him valuable for complex urban planning initiatives. But it was their relationship that had surprised them both with how naturally it had developed. They had taken Marcus's advice about proceeding slowly, spending time together without pressure or expectations. They had explored the city together, cooked dinner in each other's apartments, and supported each other through the challenges of starting new jobs in a new place. Sarah pulled her mother's Italian cookbook from one of the boxes, running her fingers over the worn cover. True to his word, Marcus had accompanied her to retrieve it from storage before their move, and they had spent several weekends working through recipes together. Cooking from her mother's collection had become one of their favorite shared activities, a way of honoring Sarah's family while creating new memories together. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "How's the unpacking going?" "I picked up groceries for tonight's cooking experiment." Sarah smiled and typed back, "Almost done. Can't wait to see what culinary adventure you've planned." They had established a tradition of trying a new recipe every Sunday, using her mother's cookbook as their guide. It had become Sarah's favorite part of the week, a time when she felt most connected to both her past and her present. An hour later, Marcus arrived at her apartment carrying bags of fresh ingredients and wearing the apron. She had bought him as a housewarming gift. It read, "Chef in Training," and never failed to make her laugh. "Today we're attempting the lasagna," he announced, setting the groceries on her kitchen counter. "I found San Marzano tomatoes at that Italian market you mentioned, and I managed to locate the exact type of ricotta your mom's recipe calls for." Sarah felt a familiar warmth at his attention to detail. Over the months, Marcus had approached her mother's recipes with the same care and respect he brought to everything else in his life. He understood that these cooking sessions were about more than just food. They were a way for Sarah to maintain a connection to her parents while building something new. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Sarah asked, pulling the recipe card from the cookbook. "This is her most complicated dish. It takes all day." "I've been training for this moment," Marcus replied with mock seriousness. "Besides, we have nowhere else to be, and I've been looking forward to this all week." They spent the afternoon working side by side in Sarah's kitchen, layering pasta with homemade sauce, ricotta mixture, and a combination of cheeses that Sarah remembered her mother weighing out with scientific precision. The process was time-consuming and required patience, but Sarah found herself enjoying every minute of it. "Your mom was clearly a perfectionist in the kitchen," Marcus observed as they carefully constructed the fourth layer of the lasagna. "These instructions are more detailed than some military operation manuals I've seen." Sarah laughed. She said that good Italian food was all about precision and patience. Dad used to joke that she approached cooking like she was conducting a symphony orchestra. Smart woman. "This smells incredible already, and it's not even in the oven yet." As they waited for the lasagna to bake, they settled on Sarah's couch, with glasses of wine, enjoying the comfortable domesticity they had developed. Sarah looked around her apartment, noting how Marcus's presence had already influenced the space. His books were mixed with hers on the shelves, his jacket hung next to hers by the door, and his travel mug sat next to her coffee maker. "I've been thinking about something," Marcus said, setting down his wine glass and turning to face her. "What's that?" "We've been in Denver for 6 months now, and this feels more like home than anywhere I've lived since before my wife died. I want you to know how grateful I am that you took a chance on building something with me." Sarah felt her chest tighten with emotion. Their relationship had evolved gradually and naturally, without dramatic declarations or pressure. They had simply grown closer through shared experiences, mutual support, and the kind of easy compatibility that made everyday activities feel meaningful. "I'm grateful too," she said. "I spent 2 years convinced that I was better off alone, that depending on someone else was too risky. You've helped me remember that connection doesn't have to mean vulnerability." "Actually," Marcus said with a slight smile, "I think it does mean vulnerability. But the right kind of vulnerability, with someone who's worthy of trust." Sarah considered his words. He was right, of course. Opening her heart to Marcus had required vulnerability, but it had been the kind that led to growth rather than pain. "Speaking of vulnerability," she said, taking a deep breath, "I have something I want to share with you." Marcus waited patiently while she gathered her thoughts. "I got a call from my former advisor this week. There's a research position opening up at the University of Colorado. It's exactly the kind of opportunity I thought I wasn't ready for, leading a team studying climate adaptation strategies for mountain communities." "That sounds incredible," Marcus said. "Are you interested?" "I am, which surprises me. 6 months ago, I would have been terrified of going back to academia, of being around all those family celebrations and traditional support systems, but now I think I might be ready to handle it." "What changed your mind?" Sarah looked at Marcus, thinking about how to articulate what she was feeling. "I realized that I'm not the same person who was afraid of those reminders. I have my own support system now, and I've learned how to carry my parents' love with me instead of feeling haunted by their absence. The research position doesn't feel like a step backward into painful territory. It feels like a step forward into work that would make them proud." Marcus's face lit up with understanding and pride. "Are you going to apply?" "I think I am. The application isn't due for another month, so I have time to prepare a strong proposal. Would you be okay with me potentially changing career directions?" "Sarah," Marcus said, reaching for her hands, I want you to pursue whatever will make you happiest and most fulfilled. Your success and happiness are more important to me than any convenience for our relationship." The timer went off, signaling that their lasagna was ready. As they moved to the kitchen to check on their creation, Sarah felt a sense of completeness that she hadn't experienced in years. The lasagna was perfect, golden and bubbling exactly the way she remembered her mother's. "I think we nailed it," Marcus said, admiring their handiwork. "I think we did," Sarah agreed. But she wasn't just talking about the lasagna. They served themselves generous portions and sat at Sarah's small dining table, the same table where she had eaten countless solitary meals during her first few weeks in Denver. Now it felt like the heart of a home she was building with someone she loved. "I have something to tell you too," Marcus said between bites of lasagna. "I've been thinking about taking some graduate courses part-time. There's a program in sustainable urban planning that would complement my work and maybe open doors for teaching opportunities eventually." "That's a wonderful idea," Sarah said. "You'd be an excellent teacher. I got the idea from watching you with your students back at the university. You have such a natural ability to make complex concepts accessible. It made me think I might enjoy that kind of work too." As they finished dinner and cleaned up together, Sarah reflected on how much their lives had changed since graduation day. They had both found meaningful work, built a comfortable life together, and discovered that they could pursue individual growth while supporting each other's dreams. "Marcus," she said, as they settled back on the couch with dessert, "do you ever think about the timing of how we met?" "All the time," he replied. "If we had met earlier when we were both in the thick of our grief, I don't think we would have been ready for each other. But by the time we found each other, we had both done enough healing to recognize something good when we saw it." Sarah nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Their relationship felt like proof that timing mattered just as much as compatibility, and that sometimes the best things came to those who were patient enough to do the work of healing first. As the evening wound down, Sarah touched the olive tree pendant she still wore every day, thinking about its inscription about being rooted in strength while reaching for tomorrow. She had found her strength in surviving loss and pursuing her goals despite overwhelming challenges. But she had found her tomorrow in this quiet apartment, sharing homemade lasagna with someone who understood both her past and her dreams for the future.